A lot of people had been abducted for years, and a lot of them are still being abducted. But we're into a situation where, what do we do now? How do we fix this? What are all the things we have to do to fix it? There are ancient extraterrestrial facility people, if you want to call them that, who have been living underground in massive caverns for thousands of years. The Earth itself is almost a honeycomb. It has millions of massive caverns. We look at the little caverns that they have over in New Mexico, and everybody goes there and they look at the cavern. They looked at the entrance of a guy's office. That's all they looked at. When we're talking caverns, Earth-wise, one of the caverns in Southern California goes way past into Oregon, and it goes east into Nevada. And it's one cavern. And there's caverns inside that cavern. There's caverns inside of caverns, not just tunnels, but there's bubble caverns inside of caverns. And some caverns are only a couple of miles long, but we are honeycombed. And so these extraterrestrials came here, some of them before Nova built the raft, and some of them came after he built the raft, after the flood. But then there's been 7 flood kinds of things that have happened here. We forget about that. My Uncle Walter had specifics of 7 times when they took place. One was a situation where we had earthquakes on a continuous basis from Alaska to the South Pole, all at the same time. Split the thing wide open. And so that caused all kinds of floods. And so, yes, we have extraterrestrials here on the planet that are not just living in caverns. They have cities there. They have industry there. They have entertainment there. They have essentially, maybe not like us, but they have essentially a full life there. They're born, they work, and they step out of the picture. And some of them have ridiculous short lives like humans. Others have in-betweens, living 2,000 or 3,000. Others don't stop living, period. And these people sort of live together in the different caverns, but obviously with totally different agendas, totally different lives, and different missions. Now, the Air Force got involved in this, and so they built their diggers, which are about half a mile long, and they'll dig a hole. It'll be 100 foot in diameter. And we have trains throughout the United States, all over the country, even connecting to Nova Scotia, and some of them connecting to other countries locally in this particular hemisphere. But the extraterrestrial tunnels are like 300 feet and close to 400 feet. And these tunnels, the tunnel diggers, dig at 2 to 3 miles an hour, and they reduce all of the rock, all of the material, everything, down to microscopic material, and they spray it on the lining of the tunnel, which then turns to be almost glass, which then is electrically excited and becomes a lighted tunnel. And these guys are running there 2 miles an hour operating this tunnel, which then has subsonic vehicles operating on rail that don't leave the rail all over the planet. Not just from ours, like from Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon to the Air Force facilities at Vandenberg. And so we've run into their tunnels digging ours. And we get not too graciously suggested to take another route. And like in New Mexico, we have a large facility there, and we've had wars with some of the extraterrestrials that are there, and wars with our military people, and light skirmishes continually. But then our people that are taken from their university laboratory to that facility, they get taken pretty fast. Like in 1 second they're there, and they take them inside, and they let them continue that particular research that they were doing at the university, except that now they are a slave. They're not a business associate. They are a slave. So now we got slavery going in these caverns all over your planet. But then that's not such a big deal, because out in the galaxy, the different extraterrestrials, they do the same thing. And they take the good guys and they abduct them, take them to their facilities on their planet, or they take them down underground of their original planet, and they do the same thing. So again, we don't have just Earth as a laboratory. We have billions of laboratories on billions of stars out in the galaxy doing the same thing. We're really low on the totem pole, unfortunately.
Okay, you saw it, I saw it, Corey saw it. This just happened. This is something that we are not fooling you. This is not a joke. Okay, Tompkins is real. I've interviewed him a bunch of times now. And Corey, how does it feel to see this stunning body of corroboration for everything that you've been telling us?
It's amazing.
He described the people inside the Earth as extraterrestrials. And he said that there are different types of lifespans, some of which live very short lives like ours, some of which live longer, and he said some of which live essentially indefinitely. So let's just get your feedback first on that statement about them being extraterrestrials.
Well, I would agree that a very large contingent of extraterrestrials, many different types, have what we called embassies in caverns all across the planet. But as I've given in my testimony, I recently had contact with a group, Inner Earth group, that claimed to have developed on this planet, which would not make them non-terrestrials.
Right. So some of these people may in fact be indigenous to Earth. It's just that they have evolved or they developed in these inner Earth areas.
Right.
Okay, now another thing that I really was taken aback by that caused me shock when I saw this was his statement that there are millions of caverns, and then he actually used the word honeycomb. Now I just want to clarify for everybody watching that he was not prompted with your testimony. He never heard you refer to it as the honeycomb Earth. You had not seen the Law of One, which also refers to it as a honeycomb Earth. So we have 3 independent sources now, all documented, in addition to others who've mentioned it that way to me privately, other insiders that don't want to come forward. So let's just start with that. Would you agree that there are, in fact, millions of caverns inside the Earth?
Yes, yes. It's the way the Earth developed. There was, I think, similar to like a vascular system going through it. And as it cooled off, you know, of molten rock, and as it cooled off, and it formed all kinds of caverns. And then the tectonic activity on the Earth, as crazy as it is, has created those as well.
Now, we had some people write comments on an article I wrote recently talking about the inner Earth, where they didn't understand why those caverns would be safe from things like giant earthquakes on the surface of the Earth.
Right. These are down towards more below, further down in the crust than most of the fault lines, except for the deepest fault lines.
Oh.
And then they do not normally, depending on their level of technological development, thus, you know, different non-terrestrials that live different ages, you know, they're in different stages of development.
Right.
You know, some of the higher technological groups, it would not be as difficult for them to live close to fault lines. But, yeah, most of this is very deep, you know, in the 20, 40-mile range of the crust. And
right, so an earthquake's only going to jiggle up near the surface, and the shakes aren't even going to make it down that far.
It jiggles all, yeah, the whole thing, shock waves travel through the rock in both directions. But a lot of them, of the more technologically developed groups, have technology to mitigate that.
Oh, like shock absorbers, basically.
Yeah, sort of.
Something like that.
Energetic.
Now, he also said, I just want to get your raw comment on this without interjecting my opinion. He mentioned a cavern that goes from California up past Oregon and then all the way over to Nevada that he says is one single contiguous cavern. That's a pretty shocking statement. What's your response to that?
Well, I've talked a little bit about the same cavern system. Part of it, we have submarines going in and out, going far inland into the United States, popping up in lakes.
Okay, so some of these caverns are not hollow and filled with air. They're going to have seawater in them in some cases.
It's a mixture. Depends on how the cavern is sealed off, how the cavern runs as opposed to a cavern that's right next to it. So a lot of the times they'll have one area that's water that they'll have submarines in. They've dug through to another cavern area that is somewhat pressurized naturally, keeps the water out, and build out facilities.
All right, so another really disturbing aspect of this clip that we just saw is him describing what appears to be a variety of different types of slavery going on. He describes slavery inside the Earth, humans being taken to other solar systems, and you've covered on this in other episodes, and you also did it with George Norrie on Beyond Belief here on Gaia. But could you touch on some of your feelings about his sentiments about the slave trade?
Yes, and he's either only reporting a small amount because it's so disturbing, or that's all he was briefed on.
Right.
Yeah, but he was touching on the the abduction scenario he touched on, but the people disappearing off the planet that, you know, that are just being abducted, that during a certain time period were being abducted by non-terrestrials and were being taken outside of our star system for a slave trade. Later on, we decided, hey, this is a commodity, we being the cabal type groups, and they started obtaining and trading humans for technology and biological material.
So what can we do about this slave trade? It's a very disturbing thing for people. I can understand they might feel powerless. Is there anything that we can do to try to bring this to a halt and get freedom to happen for people on Earth?
Well, on our end, the most we can do is make people aware that it exists. You can't tackle a problem unless you're aware there is a problem. And everyone's asleep. They've been mind controlled. And this information is going to be very disturbing and very hard to accept for many of these people.
Right.
But to mitigate it, what people can do on this end is mainly just educate themselves and others about it. So when this information does come out, you know, people won't, you know, lay in bed and suck their thumbs.
Now, you also mentioned some messages that the Blue Avians gave you regarding what will happen to people who have been kept as slaves as we go through this shift and the Draco have been defeated. And I believe this concerns certain breakaway groups.
Right, and there's some non-terrestrial groups and a couple breakaway groups that are assisting in this. The infiltrators that infiltrated the program, the Galactic Slave Trade Program, started putting tracking markers on their victims so that they could later track them down to wherever they went, no matter where in the galaxy or other galaxies, and send their allies in to retrieve them. And then after they've been retrieved, they're in all different psychological states from what they've been through. And the ancient Mayan group has been helping a lot of them recover and heal on one of their planets.
So, in short, do you think that as we get this breakdown of the negative, the Draco being defeated, as we've discussed in other episodes, that there will be a widespread rescue and salvage operation for these people that have been brought into slavery?
That's already has been ongoing.
Okay. So it's just important for people to hear then that something is being done, and a lot of these people who might be enslaved now will be able to be freed as we go through this change.
Yes, and once they go through all the healing, they will be returned to our society, whatever state it's in at that time.
Wow. All right, well, this has been really fascinating. I want to thank you for watching our show. This is certainly mind-blowing after all this time. People say, oh, Corey has no validation. Well, what you've just seen here is a game changer. And I encourage you to tell everybody you know about this, because now that we're bringing this all together, maybe a lot of people who wouldn't have taken this seriously before are going to take a second look. And we do need your help. We need as many people as possible to educate themselves about this. As Corey just said, it's vital to humanity's future that we no longer act as ostriches, that we have the awareness of what's really going on. This is Cosmic Disclosure. I'm here with Corey Good and William Tompkins. I'm your host, David Wilcock, and I thank you for watching.
Cavern. They looked at the entrance of a guy's office. That's all they looked at. When we're talking caverns, Earth-wise, one of the caverns in Southern California goes way past into Oregon, and it goes east into Nevada, and it's one cavern. And there's caverns came after he built the raft, after the flood. But then there's been 7 flood kinds of things that have happened here. We forget about that. My Uncle Walter had specifics of 7 times when they took place. One was a situation where we had earthquakes on a continuous basis from Alaska to the South Pole. A lot of people had been abducted for years, and a lot of them are still being abducted. But we're into a situation where, what do we do now? How do we fix this? What are all the things we have to do to fix it? There are ancient extraterrestrial facility people, if you want to call them that, who have been living underground in massive caverns for thousands of years. The Earth itself is almost a honeycomb. It has millions of massive caverns. We look at the little caverns that they have over in New Mexico, and everybody goes there and they look at the inside that cavern. There's caverns inside of caverns, not just tunnels, but there's bubble caverns inside of caverns. And some caverns are only a couple of miles long, but we are honeycombed. And so these extraterrestrials came here, some of them before Nova built the raft, and some of them